Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chhoda and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time, folks. I did report in my previous video that 10 Republican senators had sent a letter to President Biden asking for a meeting with a counter offer in the $600 billion range, which would include $1,000 stimulus checks on top of the $600 checks, not the $1,400 on top of the 600, and a stimulus proposal that would include a much more narrow, a much more targeted version of stimulus. Folks, I have an important update for you, an important update from the director of the White House Economic Council, Brian Deese, who was interviewed this morning, who actually said, yep, we got the letter, but he said something very important, which tells you exactly where that letter is heading and where targeted stimulus, where the $2,000 stimulus checks are heading, everyone. I'll show you that interview. I'll break it down for you. This is my commitment to you to bring you the truth wherever it might lead us. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with this channel, Ignition Time, and this is breaking news from Ignition Time. Welcome to our channel. So, folks, in brand new reporting that was published by Jeff Stein from the Washington Post, Jeff Stein actually quoted Jared Bernstein, who's another White House economic advisor. Jared Bernstein said, hey, we need to do this, otherwise, millions and millions of our fellow Americans could lose jobs. On your screen, you see this tweet from Jeff Stein. Let's start with Jeff's tweet first. Okay, so let me actually show you what Jeff is talking about. Jeff pointed out that 10 Senate Republicans, including Senator Susan Collins and Mitt Romney. By the way, if you don't know anything about that particular letter and that proposal, folks, check out the other video on my channel that I did, and that video is called Counter Offer. It's this video right here. So check out that video where I broke the news of these 10 Republican senators essentially, proposing, making that proposal. So, that plan includes money for education, stimulus payments, unemployment benefits as well, but it would only include $1,000 and would be more targeted for lower income individuals. Now, here's something interesting. Jared Bernstein, who's a director, not the director, excuse me, Brian Deese is the director of the White House Economic Council. Jared Bernstein, who's a member of the White House Economic Council, said that the failure to approve the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan would lead to 4 million fewer jobs, 1 year longer to get to full employment. Folks, do you realize how significant that is? That would mean that what Jared Bernstein is saying, by the way, he's on the White House economic team. He says it'll take a year longer to get to full employment. And again, he's talking about the $1.9 trillion Biden plan. Folks, this is completely, folks, I can't emphasize this enough. This is completely different from what Larry Kudlow, the previous director of the White House Economic Council, said. He said, oh, it's a V-shaped recovery. Car sales are good. The stock market's doing well. Gas prices are here. This is there. That is there. And he said that, hey, we just need some targeted stimulus, but the economic recovery is not dependent on that. Folks, what a big difference. What a huge difference in the focus. Let's get back to Jared Bernstein. He said we could see 4 million fewer jobs, 1 year longer to get to full employment, plus 5% permanent lifetime earnings hit to kids out of school. What this would mean is that kids who are just out of school, who are just entering the workforce, could see a permanent impact to their lifetime earnings. This, folks, this White House is really sort of digging deep and making a strong case with the American people and sort of going all out, if you will, including deploying the Vice President of the United States. Speaking of deploying the Vice President of the United States, I encourage you folks to watch this video, White House Top Secret Stimulus Strategy Explained. So definitely check out that video as well. But folks, Jared Bernstein's concerned about a very high black unemployment rate, unemployment insurance disappearing for millions. Okay, and in some new reporting, Jared Bernstein also pointed out that Bernie Sanders says he believes that the Democrats will approve. Folks, Bernie Sanders believes that the Democrats will approve the $1.9 trillion stimulus plan. And Bernie Sanders said, at the end of the day, we're going to support the President of the United States and we're going to do what the American people overwhelmingly want us to do. Wow. Guys, let me know what you think of our man, Bernie. Let me know what you think. He's clearly saying, hey, we're gonna go do the $1.9 trillion stimulus package, even if it means that we have to pursue the process of reconciliation. And Brian Deese, actually, who was recently interviewed, we'll actually take a look at his interview right now, folks. He repeatedly emphasized that letter that he got from these Republican senators, including Susan Collins from Maine. He said that despite that, the administration's insisting on a more comprehensive plan. And he said a piecemeal approach where we try to tackle one element of this and try to tackle the rest is not a recipe for success. So, folks, this is where things get really important. Brian Deese was actually interviewed this morning. I'm actually going to break down his interview. And it's really important to hear what he says because he's the director of the White House Economic Council. He's the one advising the president to do on all of these matters related to stimulus. So I would actually say he's the key guy to listen to because he reflects what the president is thinking. He is essentially, the person in charge of making the case for this, if you will. And so let's listen to his comments and I will break them down for you. Oftentimes it's important not just to hear what they say, but also what they don't say. And I think the way he answers certain questions is a big telling sign of what we are likely to see as far as stimulus is concerned. Let's just jump in. I'll break down the entire interview with the director of the White House Economic Council, Brian Deese, and I'll let you know exactly what it means for you. Let's just watch right now.
Provisions of the president's plan, the American Rescue Plan, were calibrated to the economic crisis that we face. As you know, we just lived through the worst economic year since the demobilization in the wake of World War II. Just this week, 1 million more Americans filed claims for unemployment insurance. 30 million.
And folks, you can see right off the bat, he's making a case for the huge $1.9 trillion stimulus plan. Right off the bat.
Americans reported they didn't have enough food to eat. We're in a unique crisis, and the elements of this plan really were designed and are designed to take on that crisis head on.
And folks, I want to point out, this was an interview from this morning. So this interview is it's just about 2 hours ago at the time I'm recording this video.
How are we going to get shots in people's arms? How are we going to get schools reopened so parents can get back to work? And how are we going to provide that direct relief to those families and those businesses that are struggling the most? So that's the theory behind the plan. We're certainly open to input from anywhere where we can find a constructive idea to make this package as effective as possible. But the president is uncompromising when it comes to the speed that we need to act at to address this crisis.
But are you...
Folks, I don't know if you guys picked up on that, folks. That was extremely significant. That was extremely significant. Let me actually point out that he said that, hey, the president is not going to compromise. We're open to listening to all options, but the president is not going to compromise on the fact that we need to do major stimulus. Basically saying that, hey, that letter from the Republicans, it doesn't mean much to the White House. That's basically what he said, folks.
To negotiate any points of your proposal, or, for example, are you wedded to the number, the price tag, $1.9 trillion? Are you willing to come down from that?
We really need to focus on the elements of this package and what they're intended to do. So if we look at the vaccine distribution effort, for example, the money that was passed in December is quickly running down, and we need more resources urgently to stand up the vaccine distribution efforts, the vaccine procurement efforts that we know are necessary if we're going to get our arms around this crisis. So if we want to have a viable chance at getting schools to reopen, we're going to have to provide more resources to schools. And if we don't act now...
And folks, I want to point out that the vaccine distribution efforts are crucial, and this is something that both sides agree with. Both the Republicans and the Democrats agree that the vaccine distribution is very important. So I just wanted to point that out. Let's resume the video.
The cost of that is going to be greater going forward.
So, Brian,
so we're certainly open to ideas.
Yeah, and everything you're saying is understandable. It makes sense. What I'm trying to figure out is where the points of compromise are. You talk about the specifics being most important. You would be okay if those specifics at the end of the day didn't add up to $1.9 trillion?
We've put a plan forward that is based on the bottom-up assessment of the objective need. So we welcome input to say where we may have not gotten everything.
Very important how he's answering this, folks. Very important.
Right, where we could be more effective. Certainly that's part of the process as we go forward. But what we really need to focus on now is what do we need to get this economy back on track, and what are the resources necessary to do so? And I would note that while there has been focus on this cost, increasingly over the course of the week, we have seen study after study show what the cost is if we don't act. 4 million jobs lost, significantly less GDP growth this year, children who will be set back for their lifetime if we can't get them back into school. So this is a moment of crisis, and in moments of crisis, we've heard from the top economic advisors from President Bush, President Trump, economists across the board saying the cost of doing too little right now far outweighs the cost of doing too much. That's the theory behind the president's plan.
Let me drill down on
folks, basically what he's saying is we need to do something now, and we need to do something big, effectively saying that we're not going to do something small based on what's proposed by the Republicans. Very interesting, folks, making the case for the $1.9 trillion stimulus. And he's about to speak on the targeting of the $2,000 stimulus checks, because that is something that comes up during this conversation. Let's get back and resume where we left off.
And that is something that these 10 Republicans are in favor of. So is Democrat Joe Manchin, and that is to target the stimulus checks. In fact, you talk about studies, a nonpartisan analysis found that families making over $78,000 a year barely spent the last round of stimulus checks. So are you willing to make these checks more targeted to only people who really need the help?
We want to get cash into the pockets of the families and the businesses who need it the most. That's why we have unemployment insurance extension for people who have lost their jobs through no faults of their own, why we have support for nutrition and hunger, support to avoid families being evicted from their homes and being put out on the street.
But what about
and also the
$1,400
$1,400 checks.
Will you target those $1,400?
Yeah, the $1,400 checks. We're open to looking at how to make the entire package effective at achieving its objective, including providing support to families with children, providing direct.
So, folks, notice how the interviewer uses the word targeted and Brian Deese uses the word effective. He's not using the word targeted because the moment he says that, the Republicans are going to seize on that. So notice the use of his words. He's basically saying we're open to making everything better, but we still want to do something large and comprehensive. Super interesting comments, folks, from Brian Deese.
Child tax credits to families that have children and who have been hit the hardest in this crisis. That's certainly a place that we're willing to sit down and think about, are there ways to make the entire package more effective? I would just reinforce that we can't take on this issue without dealing with those who are unemployed. We can't.
Folks, there I am. I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure what happened to the live stream. This is what happens when you do something live. Okay, so I appreciate your patience. Let's get back to that video. I'm going to continue pretty much where I left off. Okay, let me get back to that exact same segment.
Provisions of the president's plan, the amount of that is going to be greater going forward. So we're certainly open to ideas.
Yeah, and everything you're saying is understandable. It makes sense. What I'm trying to figure out is,
we've put a plan forward that is based on the bottom-up assessment of the objective need. So we welcome input to say where we may have not gotten everything right, where we could be more effective. Certainly that's part of the process as we go forward. But what we really need to focus on now is what do we need to get this economy back on track, and what are the resources necessary to do so? And I would note that while there has been focus on this cost, increasingly over the course of the week, we have seen study after study show what the cost is if we don't act. 4 million jobs lost, significantly less GDP growth this year, children who will be set back for their lifetime if we can't get them back into school. So this is a moment of crisis, and in moments of crisis, we've heard from the top economic advisors from President Bush, President Trump, economists across the board saying the cost of doing too little right now far outweighs the cost of doing too much. That's the theory behind the president.
So, folks, again, he's making the case for a large stimulus package. Let's listen again to the way he responds to the question about targeted stimulus checks, because that, folks, is what's more important, and that's where I think we got cut off earlier. So I'm going to just go back a bit and emphasize that again, okay?
Let me drill down on one specific, and that is something that these 10 Republicans are in favor of. So is Democrat Joe Manchin, and that is to target the stimulus checks. In fact, you talk about studies, a nonpartisan analysis found that families making over $78,000 a year barely spent the last round of stimulus checks. So are you willing to make these checks more targeted to only people who really need the help?
We want to get cash into the pockets of the families and the businesses who need it the most. That's why we have unemployment insurance extension for people who have lost their jobs through no faults of their own, why we have support for nutrition and hunger, support to avoid families being evicted from their homes and being put out on the street.
But what about
and also the
stimulus
$1,400 checks.
Will you target those $1,400?
Yeah, the $1,400 checks. We're open to looking at how to make the entire package effective at achieving its objective, including providing support to families with children, providing direct child tax credits to families that have children and who have been hit the hardest in this crisis. That's certainly a place that we're willing to sit down and think about, are there ways to make the entire package more effective? I would just reinforce that we can't take on this issue without dealing with those who are unemployed. We can't take on this issue without dealing with those who are going hungry. And
so, folks, this is where it gets really significant. The director of the White House Economic Council, Brian Deese, is basically saying, "Hey, we may be open to doing something a little bit more targeted, but we're not going to back off on unemployment benefits extensions." And let me be clear. The Biden plan wants an extension from March, which is on the 14th of March is when the $300 week booster is scheduled to end. The Biden team wants an extension from March all the way through September and making it $400 instead of $300. Folks, that's what the Biden team wants. And you're about to hear in another video that I do later today, Senator Rob Portman from Ohio, his response to that is basically saying, hey, we don't know what the economy is going to look like in September of 2021. So why do we need to extend unemployment benefits that long? That's actually what's going on. But let's get back to Brian Deese, who's saying, look, we're willing to listen. And by the way, again, notice his use of the word effective, whereas, the Republicans use the word targeted. He says, we're willing to make it more effective. Now, here's the interesting thing about politics, folks. The word effective means different things to different people. The word effective could mean targeted if you're a Republican, or could mean, well, we'll just cut down, instead of 160 billion for vaccine distribution, we'll make it 155 billion. And the Republicans are going to be like, what? No, that's not what we meant. So these are the semantics that are being played right now. But he does respond to the $2,000 stimulus checks. And let's listen closely to exactly what he says. Let's get back and resume the video.
As we think about the targeting, we think this plan is really targeted to provide cash into the pockets of the people who are the most in need. Certainly open to figuring out if we can make that entire package as effective as possible.
Okay, but specifically on the checks, I think I'm hearing you say that that is a place you're willing to negotiate to make them more targeted to the people who need them most and not go to people who aren't going to spend them.
We're open to that idea. We're open to ideas across the board. What I want to reinforce is that if we're going to look at ways of targeting, we need to look at how this plan is targeted overall. And so the support that is going directly to children in terms of the child tax credit, the support that is going to keep people in their homes through eviction, those are highly targeted, and we should think about how all of these pieces work together to achieve that end goal, which is to get money into the pockets of the families and the small businesses that need it the most.
I want to ask about something that was brewing this week in a big way, and that is the chaos that we saw on Wall Street this week. Essentially, a group of individual investors on the internet forum Reddit banded together to buy shares in the company Stop.
And folks, this is also pretty interesting. Brian Deese is going to be asked to chime in on the GameStop situation, but stick around till the end because we do have another important update about the stimulus situation. But let's listen to what Brian Deese had to say about the GameStop situation.
GameStop, the value of the shares skyrocketed, which dramatically upended the market. You're the president's top economic advisor, so what's your reaction to this?
Well, the SEC is looking into all of the elements of this situation with a real focus on protecting retail investors and the integrity of the market. I think bigger picture, what this reinforces is that the stock market is not a good barometer of what's happening in the real economy for most American families.
Now, folks, that's significant. He said that. Okay. again, the director of the previous director of the White House Economic Council kept talking about how high the stock market was. In fact, Mike Mulvaney, the previous White House chief of staff, told Fox News that the only reason we put Larry Kudlow on the air was to try and boost the stock market. And Larry Kudlow kept saying the stock market is doing well, the stock market is doing well. And this director of the White House Economic Council is saying the stock market is not an indicator of the true pain and suffering of the economy. He's right. The stock market is not an indicator of the true pain and suffering of the economy because individuals in travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality have been impacted much, much, much worse than anybody else. For you guys, for a lot of our fellow Americans, it's about putting food on the table. It's about paying rent. It's about keeping the lights on. So this is interesting that he's saying that. But again, folks, I have done other videos on the GameStop situation, and I did mention Rob Portman earlier. Rob Portman is a Republican senator from Ohio who actually responds to these comments from Brian Deese because he was on this network directly after Brian Deese. And keep in mind, he's decided not to run again, Rob Portman from Ohio, the Republican senator, but he's still around for the next 2 years. So he's still around as a senator for the next 2 years. He's been in the Senate for 30 years, just so that our viewers and subscribers know. Let's get back to Brian Deese for the final segment of his interview.
Our focus this week and right now is on those million Americans, more than 1 million Americans, who had to file for unemployment insurance this week because the economy is moving backward and we are facing a historic crisis.
Yeah,
and the steps we need to take to support them are really focused on measures that will help Main Street small businesses, help families that are struggling. That's really our focus.
Which is understandable, but presumably you can have multiple focuses at once, especially when it comes to people's financial health. I know you worked on issues like this years ago. You were on the Obama team dealing with the aftermath of the 2008 crisis. This has the potential to blow up pretty big. So
our immediate focus is on putting a floor under this economic crisis, because if we're not able to take decisive action right now, the people who will struggle will be American families across the country and small businesses on Main Street. We've got to keep that as our focus in the immediate term.
Brian Deese, Joe Biden.
So folks, those were comments from Brian Deese. I think the big takeaway, the huge takeaway, everyone, is that the White House is open to targeted stimulus as long as their other demands are met. I believe that the way this is going to end up, and the way this is going to eventually turn out, is that we will see some version of the $1.9 trillion stimulus package. Maybe if they come close to 1.3, 1.4 with Republican senators, they might do that. And but I don't see how Republican senators would come to 1.3, 1.4. But I feel that right now the odds are on reconciliation to pass this huge, massive package, so that the Democrats can, say that they fulfilled their campaign promise, so that Bernie Sanders can get what he wants. No, but seriously, but jokes aside, so that, I mean, there's a lot of need for stimulus. Should it be more targeted? Personally, I feel it should be more targeted, because there are people who shouldn't be getting stimulus checks. And, there are some who definitely need the stimulus checks a whole lot more, because if you're already making money, then you don't need the stimulus check. Folks, the best idea is not a Republican idea or a Democratic idea. The best idea is an American idea that takes the best of both the Republican and the Democratic ideas. And I'm hoping that we can come to that. Thanks everyone for watching. I am going to release a couple more videos about a Democratic senator essentially lashing out against his own party about the way stimulus talks are taking place, and important comments from Republican Senator Rob Portman, who has decided not to run for re-election, but who's still going to be around for the next 2 years, and who's considered a very calm and stable influence. He's not, he's not a crazy person like some people from both sides. So I'll be covering that in the next video, everyone. I hope you learned something new. Definitely stick around, because I'm going to talk about comments from Portman in the next video, where he essentially presents his point of view on the Brian Deese proposal. Super important comments, and then comments from the conservative Democrat Joe Manchin on. He's like, the White House never told me that the vice president was going to be speaking at a regional network in my state. Yeah, and I'll tell you why I think that's happening and what the ultimate game is. So I'll be covering that in the next video. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining me on a Sunday. I'll see you folks in the next video.